Hey friends, Peter Fastiano here. Welcome back to my series on the Canon M6 Mark II. In today's video, I'm going to go ahead and run through all of the different picture profiles that are found in the camera, and then that's going to kind of lead me into a series on color correction and color grading on some of the Canon cameras that I have and how you use all of this within Premiere Pro using their lumetri scopes. If this sounds interesting to you and you're not a subscriber to this video, go ahead and click on the subscribe button down below, turn on that bell notification, so when I do publish a video on this mini series on color correction, color profiles, and color grading, you'll be notified. Let's go ahead and jump into today's video. Picture profiles. Before I get into it, I just want to let everybody know, I'm not a colorist, I'm not a professional, I'm an amateur, and I'm just sharing my ideas. Color processing and how an image looks is all subjective. So this is just my thoughts on picture profiles. Right now I'm shooting in a standard profile. Somebody at Canon felt like a standard profile should have a certain amount of sharpness, contrast, saturation, and color tone. So they came up with this thought, put it into the camera, and for those of you who don't want to post-process, you can just take the standard profile and publish a JPEG or publish a video without having to do any post-processing in Premiere Pro or Final Cut. No color correction, no adding extra LUTs. You just use the footage as is and go from there. And it's important to note that these picture profiles will not affect your raw photos. This is only affecting video and JPEGs. So if you have an idea that your pictures need to look a certain way, but you're not exactly happy with the portrait picture profile, you can actually go into the settings in the camera and change a little bit of the sharpness, contrast, color tone, and saturation to suit your needs. And that way you're not basically roped into what one person's idea is about what a portrait should look like. Or any of these picture profiles, you can actually go in and change and slightly tweak each one of them. And something else to keep in mind, not all of these picture profiles are meant to be shot inside. And by no means is this going to be the best representation of every single profile. I'm sitting in my studio right now. I'm on landscape profile. Landscape, I'm supposed to be outside for you to see the difference. And maybe the yellowish tone that is seen on this one is going to look a little bit better outside in the sun. So use your discretion. You know, it's pretty obvious, you know, landscape should be outside. Portrait might be some combination of inside, outside. So just use common sense and take a look at the names of the profiles. And if you absolutely want to use them, try to select the one that's best for your individual situation. All right, next up is the fine detail profile. And since we're talking about fine details or details, let's go ahead and go over what I'm doing with my studio. Everything is straight out of camera. I'm not changing anything. So each profile that I go through, you might see that some are a little bit overexposed, some might be a little bit underexposed. The tint's going to be looking a little bit different. So right now I have my key light as the Aperture 120D Mark II. I have the light dome on it with a grid. It's set at 56%. I'm shooting with a camera lens combination M6 Mark II with the Sigma 18-35, currently at 24 millimeters. I'm at ISO 500, 1.8 aperture, 1/60th of a second, and I'm shooting at 30 frames per second. My hair light's at 100%. I have a Roscoe purple gel on a LED bulb. I have a fill light in the corner. It's a very tungsten-y kind of look. It's just a lamp with a yellowish orange lampshade over the top of it. Those are my fine details. This is the fine detail profile. Let's move on to the next one. This profile, the neutral profile, is basically where I live. The majority of all of my videos are shot in the neutral profile, and I will do small, tiny tweaks in post-processing with the Premiere Pro, whether I add contrast, I kind of go into the lumetri scopes and kind of adjust my levels, because sometimes, you know, my highlights and shadows might not be, you know, exactly right, which leads me to my next video. I'm going to talk a little bit about color correction and color grading. And in order to do that, I'm going to be taking a look at the X-Rite color checker for video. That's going to give you a couple of options for like white balancing and some of your color squares here with your highlights and shadows and highlights, shadows, and midtones. So that's to come. And again, if you're not subscribed here and you feel like, hey, this is kind of a cool content, why don't you consider subscribing, clicking that subscribe button, turning on that bell notification so when I do publish another video, just like I mentioned earlier, you'll be notified. Let's go ahead and move on to the next profile. So what happens if you filter through all the profiles and you don't like them? You get to the FAITHFIL profile, which I'm shooting on now, and you just don't like the footage. You've gone in and you've tweaked the sharpness, the saturation, the contrast, and the color tone within the menu, and you still don't quite have what you want. Well, you can actually do a custom profile, and you can go in there and put something in there to your liking. And you might be thinking, well, if I don't like any of that, are there other options? Well, yes, there are, but maybe not with this camera, or maybe not a lower end camera. If you guys may have heard of log footage or log profiles, I think Canon has C-Log, C-Log 2, C-Log 3. Sony might have like S-Log, and there are some other different log profiles from other companies, or maybe even the Canon and Sony. They have their own individual. And basically what a log profile will do is it'll give you an image that looks very flat, which will allow you to get into color correction and color grading into the post-processing. And that's, like I said before in this last profile, something else that I'm going to be touching on in a little bit. But basically what a log profile will allow you to do is get the most dynamic range out of a scene. So if you're outside and you have a very bright sky and you have some shadows, it allows you to manipulate the footage a little bit, gather that information onto the sensor, and it will allow you to pull down the highlights, pull up the shadows, and kind of mess around with the midtones so you can have more control over your footage. It's basically like a raw file when you're shooting photos. It collects all this detail, and you don't quite necessarily see it when you're shooting it, but when you put it into a program to post-process it, then you can start to manipulate it a lot, and you can get the most out of your footage. And kind of transitioning into like a grayish flat profile, let's go ahead and move on to the monochrome, which is the black and white, and then we'll call this video good. Not much to say about monochrome. Black and white, very stylistic. If you guys are going to want to shoot black and white, this is your go-to. If you want to pull color out of this one, you can't. Everything is baked into the file in black and white. No saturation at all. So just keep that in mind. And just like all of the others, all of those profiles are going to be baked into the file. So if you want to push the colors a little bit more, you're only going to be able to manipulate them just a little bit before they start falling apart. So keep that in mind. If you really do want to push your highlights, midtones, and shadows, you're going to have to shoot in some sort of log profile, which means you're going to have to get some sort of different camera. I know there might be some sort of downloads that you can actually put onto these cameras. I'm not familiar with that as much, so I can't really comment on that. So if you guys do know how to get a log profile on these lower end cameras, put some comments down below. Let me know about color correction, color grading, what cameras you guys are using in the comments down below. If you like this content, one more time, third time, like, subscribe, share, turn on that bell notification, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye.